West African Ancestry. At the 2008 Beijing Olympics, Usain Bolt didn't just win the 100 meters. He ran so fast he slowed down to celebrate before crossing the finish line, and still broke the world record. That moment didn't come from nowhere. Most of the world's fastest sprinters share something: West African ancestry, and buried inside that lineage is a gene called ACTN3, which keeps fast-twitch muscle fibers fully loaded and ready. More fast-twitch muscle means more explosive force off the ground, shorter contact time, and higher top-end speed. A CTN3 basically tells your fast-twitch fibers to lock in. They never clock out. Studies also point to favorable power-to-body mass ratios, powerful hips and thighs, with enough lean muscle to generate serious force without carrying unnecessary weight. And then there's culture. Jamaica built an entire machine around the sprint, youth competitions everywhere, serious coaching pipelines, and a country that treats Usain Bolt less like an athlete and more like a national deity. Favorable genetics walked into a system designed to make the most of it. That combination, muscle biology meeting cultural infrastructure, is what actually produces dynasties. West African ancestry gives you the engine. Jamaica just happened to build the best track for it. East African ancestry. Nobody trains harder than someone who ran 5 miles to school every morning before breakfast. For Kalenjin children growing up at 2,400 meters above sea level, long-distance running isn't a sport. It's just Tuesday. By the time a teenager competes seriously, they've already built an aerobic foundation that most athletes spend entire careers trying to construct. Eliud Kipchoge grew up exactly like this, and in 2019, he ran a full marathon in under 2 hours, a barrier that seems so impossible it's considered superhuman speed. He ran 26 miles at a pace most people can't hold for a single mile, and then he said it was just about believing in yourself. Thanks, Eliud. That efficiency has a physical explanation. Kalenjin runners tend to carry less mass in their lower legs, which means less energy spent swinging their limbs with every stride. Across thousands of steps in a race, that small difference quietly becomes a massive one. Sports scientists spent decades studying the world's best runners and concluded that having less calf is actually an advantage. Turns out every gym bro was wrong, and it doesn't stop there. Altitude exposure reshapes the cardiovascular system over time. A fiercely competitive local ecosystem sharpens race intelligence and pacing instincts from a young age. The whole environment essentially functions as a performance laboratory. West African ancestry builds the sprinter's engine. East African ancestry perfects the fuel economy. Scandinavian Ancestry. Forget the Viking mythology. The real strength story coming out of Northern Europe isn't about raiders or runes. It's about what happens when unusually large human beings spend centuries around heavy objects and then make it into competitions. Northern Europe consistently sits near the top of global height rankings. The Netherlands, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, all up there. A larger skeleton means more surface area for muscle attachment. More muscle attachment means more raw force potential. Hafthor Björnsson is 206 centimeters tall and once deadlifted 501 kilograms. At that scale, it's no longer just weightlifting. It's literally moving mountains. No wonder he was the natural choice for the mountain in Game of Thrones, a character literally written to be the biggest boy alive. Iceland has been hosting stone lifting competitions since the 9th century. Centuries before anyone invented a barbell, Icelanders were already arguing about who lifted more. That culture compounds over generations, producing coaching knowledge, training infrastructure, and a social environment where strength is a legitimate path to status and identity. Grip strength and connective tissue tolerance develop the same way. Years of serious training inside a culture that never stopped demanding it. The pipeline selects for people who respond best and keeps refining them. The Vikings didn't just conquer lands. Apparently, they also figured out progressive overload. Tibetan and Sherpa ancestry. Imagine training for months to summit Everest. Oxygen tanks, altitude sickness pills, the whole setup. You're gasping at base camp, just unpacking your bag, and then a Sherpa walks past you carrying 70 pounds of gear and looks like he's on a morning stroll. Most people assume high-altitude performance means thicker, more oxygen-packed blood. Sherpa physiology works through better delivery instead, moving blood faster through tissues using nitric oxide signaling so muscles stay fed even in dangerously thin air. Variants in genes called EPAS1 and EGLN1 change how the body senses and responds to low oxygen at a fundamental level. These are among the strongest natural selection signals ever recorded in humans. Evolution basically looked at the Himalayas and decided to redesign humans. Genomic studies keep finding the same result. This plateau didn't just shape the landscape, it shaped the biology of everyone who stayed. And there's a quieter bonus. Most people who try to acclimatize at altitude end up overproducing red blood cells, which thickens the blood and eventually causes chronic mountain sickness. Sherpa populations skip that overcorrection entirely, allowing them to live and work at extreme elevations across entire lifetimes. Some advantages are built in the gym. This one was built over thousands of years at 4,000 meters above sea level. Southeast Asian Ancestry. Watch a Muay Thai fighter throw a roundhouse kick in slow motion. The hip rotates, the knee whips through, the shin arrives before your brain registers the movement started. It looks like they skipped time. Turns out Thailand has been perfecting that move for centuries. The physical engine behind that whip is something called the stretch shortening cycle, a rapid muscle stretch followed by an immediate contraction that releases stored elastic energy. Think of it like a spring, loading and releasing. Elite strikers exploit this mechanism instinctively, generating far more force than raw muscle strength alone would produce. Thailand didn't know they were running a biomechanics laboratory. They just thought they were making better fighters. To top it off, Thailand has been professionally coaching striking techniques for centuries. Children in Muay Thai gyms develop pelvic rotation, hip timing, and limb coordination at ages, when most kids are still figuring out how to kick a soccer ball straight. By the time they compete seriously, the movement pattern is so deeply wired it looks effortless, because for them, it basically is. Greater natural mobility helps too. Wider angles, higher kicks, more deceptive feints. Mobility paired with strength and control is what separates a dangerous striker from a flexible one. Thailand's training culture figured that balance out a long time ago. In Muay Thai, your joints are either your greatest weapon or your earliest retirement plan, usually both. Mediterranean Ancestry. Your ancestors were doing Zone 2 cardio before it had a name. They just called it walking to the market. Uphill, both ways, in 100-degree heat. Mediterranean geography is coastlines pressed against mountains. For centuries, daily life in Greece and Italy meant climbing hills to farm, descending to trade, and doing it again tomorrow. That landscape quietly built a specific kind of athlete, one who can keep going long after everyone else has stopped. Paolo Maldini played elite professional football until he was 41. Marco Pantani climbed alpine stages that broke riders half his age. Mediterranean athletes have long excelled in sports, where the winner is whoever can repeat hard efforts the longest without falling apart. And the terrain they grew up in is not a coincidence. Then there's the food. Olive oil, fish, legumes, vegetables. The traditional Mediterranean plate is one of the most studied diets in nutrition research, consistently linked to better heart health and faster recovery between training sessions. A healthier heart means more consistent training over more years. Compounded across a lifetime, that's a serious advantage. Growing up in Mediterranean heat also trains the body to manage pace and hydration under warm conditions, a quiet edge in summer tournaments and endurance events that athletes from cooler climates actively travel to replicate. The most powerful performance advantage in Mediterranean ancestry was already on the dinner table. Your grandmother knew. She just didn't publish the study. Central Asian Ancestry. Some of the most dominant UFC grapplers alive today trace their wrestling foundations back to a festival held every summer on the Mongolian steppe, where children compete in front of entire communities before they're old enough to get a smartphone. A large part comes from Nadam. It's Mongolia's national festival of wrestling, horse racing, and archery that's been around for centuries. What it produces physically is specific trunk control, the ability to brace and stabilize through a twisting, bending spine while someone actively tries to fold you in half. Most people train their core for beach season. Wrestlers train it to survive. Mongolian wrestlers develop it from childhood, inside a system that has been refining these movement patterns for generations. Extraordinary grip strength is another reason. In grappling sports, grip is a battery. Once it drains, technique collapses with it. Dana Batgirl, a Mongolian UFC fighter, carries that foundation into a modern cage. Relentless clinch pressure and control that opponents consistently describe as suffocating. When Batgirl grabs you in the clinch, the fight is already halfway over. The other half is just paperwork. Nomadic life built the foundation underneath. Lifting, carrying, and riding develops glutes, hamstrings, and lower back working together as one unit. Competing in front of your entire community from a young age does something else. It builds the psychological hardness that separates good athletes from great ones who rewrite history. Some ancestries inherit a gene. Mongolian ancestry inherits an entire wrestling culture. Indigenous American Ancestry. Imagine your daily commute was a 50-kilometer run through mountain canyons. No GPS watch, no energy gels, just trails, elevation, and the rest of your community running alongside you. For the Raramuri people of Mexico's Copper Canyon, that's Monday morning. Running among the Raramuri is spiritual practice, community ritual, and social identity all at once. Their foot races are tied to prayer and community cohesion. Showing up to run is the same as showing up for your people. When your entire culture is the training program, there's no more excuse to not train. The terrain handles the physical development. Copper Canyon throws steep climbs, brutal descents, and rugged, uneven trails at you daily. Children navigate this landscape before anyone calls it training. The result is resilient feet, powerful calves, and a natural ability to absorb downhill impact that modern runners spend years trying to learn without getting injured. Lorena Ramirez, a Raramuri ultra runner, often finishes ultramarathons ahead of fully sponsored athletes. She competes in a traditional skirt and huarache sandals. Turns out those $200 running shoes aren't the problem you're bad at running. Centuries of minimal footwear shapes how the foot lands and how impact travels through the body. Multi-hour traditional races teach pacing and fuel management in real life. The Raramuri have been running for centuries. The rest of the world just started calling it ultramarathon. Balkan Ancestry. If you grew up in the Dinaric Alps, running along Croatia, Bosnia, Montenegro, being 6'5" wouldn't make you stand out. It would just make you average. The Dinaric region contains some of the tallest populations ever recorded on Earth. That single fact has quietly funneled an outsized number of athletes into sports where height stops being an advantage and starts being a requirement. Basketball is the clearest example. Taller players finish at the rim over defenders, contest shots without fouling, and rebound over crowds in ways shorter players simply cannot replicate. Nikola Jokic, 3-time NBA MVP from Serbia, is arguably the best basketball player on earth right now, but only if you're a Nuggets fan. Wingspan compounds everything. Many elite Balkan athletes carry arm spans exceeding their already considerable height. Longer arms expand defensive coverage, extend rebounding radius, and make passing lanes feel impossibly narrow for opponents. In combat sports, extra reach controls striking distance and clinch positioning before the opponent gets close enough to be dangerous. A larger frame also carries more absolute muscle mass, which matters enormously in contact-heavy sports. The trade-off is real, though. Taller bodies place greater stress on joints and connective tissue, making injury management a part of the job. In certain sports, ancestry is just physics, and the Dinaric Alps have physics dialed in. Polynesian and Samoan ancestry. Picture lining up against a Samoan rugby player who's the same height as you. You might think he's manageable, but then the whistle blows and you reconsider every life choice that led to this moment. Polynesian and Samoan athletes are disproportionately represented in rugby and American football, and population-level bone density data explains why. Studies in New Zealand found higher bone mineral density in Polynesian populations compared to European ancestry groups. Higher bone density means better tolerance for the kind of repeated, high-impact loading that sprinting, jumping, and full-speed tackling produce across an entire career. Lean mass compounds the advantage. DEXA scans, the gold standard for body composition measurement, on elite Polynesian rugby athletes show higher lean mass compared to non-Polynesian teammates at the same body size. Manu Tuilagi, a Samoan English rugby player, has spent his career being described by opponents as the hardest man in the sport to tackle. His opponents probably felt like foam noodles when running into him. Paired with short burst acceleration, bone density, and high lean mass produce the kind of athlete that collision sports are designed around, one who can deliver contact, absorb it, and repeat it across 80 minutes without falling apart. The Pacific Ocean built voyagers who could endure anything, and their descendants traded the canoe for a rugby pitch. Japanese coastal ancestry. Somewhere off the Japanese coastline, a woman in her 60s takes one breath, dives 30 feet underwater, collects shellfish from the ocean floor, and surfaces calm. She has been doing this since she was a teenager, and she'll probably outlast your gym membership. These extraordinary women are called the ama, Japan's traditional breath hold divers. Repeated breath hold diving is essentially high-stakes interval training for the autonomic nervous system, the part of your body that controls heart rate, blood flow, and stress response without you thinking about it. Every dive triggers bradycardia, the heart slowing dramatically to conserve oxygen. Vasoconstriction redirects blood to vital organs. The body learns, over thousands of repetitions, to stay calm and functional under conditions that would send most people into panic. Then there's the longevity angle. AMA divers remain physically active well into older age. Scientists are still trying to find the ultimate answer to how decades of intense physical activity affects aging. But if there's ever a fountain of youth, you might have to dive with the AMA to find it. What's more, these skills transfer further than diving. Swimming, rowing, and combat sport athletes all use breath control skills to help them perform better. Some people train their lungs at the gym. The Ama trained theirs in the Pacific Ocean for 1,000 years. Andean Ancestry. At 3,000 meters, your lungs are working twice as hard just to keep you upright. But Quechua communities in the Andes built an entire civilization up there. Where Tibetan ancestry rewired blood flow efficiency, Quechua ancestry took a different approach. Flood the bloodstream with hemoglobin, the protein that carries oxygen through the body. More hemoglobin means more oxygen delivered per heartbeat. Lowlanders call that doping. Andeans call it evolution. The lungs grew to match. Many Andean highlanders develop larger lung volumes than lowlanders, bigger ventilation hardware, pulling more air with every breath. Combined with higher hemoglobin, the result is a cardiovascular system built to extract maximum value from thin mountain air. Growing up where every step is oxygen taxed also builds something harder to measure, a lifetime of pacing intelligence. The body and mind learn early how to move efficiently when resources are limited. There's a warning built into this advantage, though. Push hemoglobin production too far, and the blood gets too thick to circulate properly. That's chronic mountain sickness. Evolution gave Andean highlanders an upgrade. It just came with very specific terms and conditions. In the Andes, the line between peak performance and peak risk runs through your own bloodstream. West Asian Ancestry. Before the modern gym existed, Iranians were training in underground circular chambers called zurkhaneh, ancient athletic temples where wrestlers and strongmen trained to live drumming and poetry. Yet your gym is still playing the best 100 pop songs from the 2000s. Take Iran's Pahlavi tradition, for example. Children enter the system young. Coaching knowledge passes between generations. Strength gets treated as a craft rather than a workout. Hossein Rezazadeh grew up inside that system, became Olympic super heavyweight weightlifting champion, and broke the world record twice. He's just that good. The physical advantage underneath is measurable. Sports science research on Iranian elite wrestlers consistently finds that arm span and body geometry determine who controls a grapple, who reaches the opponent first, who establishes position, and who dictates the match. In a sport decided by centimeters of reach and angles of control, body geometry is everything. Iran's wrestling pipeline is so deep that competing inside it from childhood produces a level of technical refinement most athletes never reach. The selection pressure alone creates coaching knowledge sophisticated enough to identify favorable body geometry from a young age. In West Asian strength culture, the weight room came thousands of years before commercial gym, and it still had better music. Melanesian Ancestry. Imagine a researcher shows up to your village with a stopwatch and a jump mat. You've never trained formally in your life, and you're still fast. Nobody told you that you were supposed to train first. Growing up in Melanesia means navigating mountainous terrain, steep climbs, and uneven ground every single day. Children build ankle stability, foot strength, and explosive lower body power before anyone calls it training. Scientists tested over 1,000 Papua New Guinean athletes on vertical jump, sprinting, and agility, and athletes from mountainous regions consistently outperformed those from flatter areas. The landscape was the gym the whole time. Fiji's rugby culture takes that raw physical foundation and weaponizes it. Rugby sevens rewards exactly the traits the Melanesian environment quietly builds: explosive acceleration, reactive jumping, and agility under pressure. Filippo Nkosi has been one of the most explosive players in international rugby sevens for years. His acceleration and jumping ability make him one of the hardest players on earth to contain in open space. Fiji punches so far above its population size in world rugby that the scoreboard occasionally looks like a mistake. Some athletic advantages come from centuries of intentional training. Others were hiding in the landscape the whole time. Dutch and Low Countries Ancestry. The Dutch are the tallest people on earth, and in rowing, that matters more than almost any other sport. Rowing is a lever sport. Every stroke converts leg drive and trunk swing into forward momentum. Longer limbs mean more stroke length and more work done per pull. At elite level, that mechanical advantage compounds across thousands of strokes per race. Dutch rowing programs are built around the expectation that tall athletes will keep showing up. So far, the country has not disappointed. But height alone doesn't build a rowing engine. Dutch cycling culture does. In the Netherlands, cycling is daily transport. Children bike to school, and adults bike to work. Their commute is someone else's training plan. A population that moves aerobically every single day builds cardiovascular foundations that athletes from car-dependent cultures spend years trying to replicate artificially. Marianne Vos, widely considered the greatest female cyclist in history, grew up in a country where cycling is simply how you get around. She became the best in the world at something she learned just getting to school. That cultural baseline runs deep across Dutch endurance sports. Rowing, speed skating, and cycling all benefit from the same aerobic foundation that daily movement quietly builds. Turns out the secret to elite endurance sport was just a flat country and nowhere to park. If you like this video and want to learn more about different genetic ancestries, check out these other videos.